Hello, everyone. This is Genealogy Adventures. My name is Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. How are you guys doing today?
We hope that you're having a blessed Sunday. Thank you, as always, for sharing part of your Sunday with us. We hope,
Most definitely,
and
most
we
definitely.
sincerely and genuinely hope that everyone is kind of well and safe and where you need to be.
Taking care of what you need to take care of, washing up, cleaning your hands, washing the walls every now and then. I'm OCD, so yeah, I'm gonna tell you to wash the walls. It's really a good thing to do.
And we're definitely practicing our social distance at the moment.
As you can see, I'm not close to my cousin, as close as I normally would be. So
And without further ado, I just want to double check that we still have Maya on the line.
I'm still here.
Okay, well, I'm just getting ready to introduce you. We are so pleased to have Maya Miller in the house. She's an independent nonfiction writer, editor, and audio producer, and the founder of Race Women, an archive research project honoring our earliest black feminist foremothers. For 5 years, Maya has been the senior book editor and animation producer at StoryCorps, the National Oral History Organization, and we'll be posting links to all of this throughout the show. If you're not familiar with StoryCorps, amazing project capturing American history and people's actual stories.
yes.
So while with StoryCorps, she edited 3 anthologies and produced nearly 20 animated shorts, for which her team has earned 2 Emmy Award nominations, as well as a Peabody, which is nothing to sneeze at, and DuPont Columbia Awards. She spent several years as an archive researcher at the Johnson Publishing Company, which is home to Ebony and Jet magazines. And she's worked at the African American Oral History Project, The History Makers. She received a master's degree in journalism from New York University with a concentration in cultural reporting and criticism. And without further ado, welcome, Maya. We really are looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And Donnie, did you want to do a little overview about what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, today we're gonna talk. I'm gonna tell you how we found we. So okay, this is how we found Maya. We found Maya because Brian and I were thinking about shows for Women History Month because we wanted, even though this show normally focuses on genealogy and researching and things of that nature, but the past 2 months, both February and March, we wanted to make sure that those were the least talked about people in the world. So we want to talk about them. Y'all know how we are. And
And I want to make the point, it's no disrespect to the usual kind of the more famous Black American names that usually get featured during Black History Month and perhaps
right,
Women's
but
History Month.
it's about and okay, you okay.
So it's still acknowledging what they contributed, but what we were really interested in
It's
is
the other folks.
the other folks.
And that's just how, y'all know me. Y'all know how I am. So I appreciate what my wonderful cousin just said, but we already know about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. We already know about people like Ida B. Wells and Harriet Beecher. We already know. There are so many other people out here that have done so much other stuff, and Brian and I were trying to figure out what we could do, and he came up with, I wonder how many women black journalists there were. So we started Googling, and Maya's article popped up. And it's awesome. And she talks about 6 totally different women that a lot of people may not even know about. And then the race woman thing was also something that popped up. But we were really wanting to focus on that. But like I said to you earlier, we probably will ask questions on the race women thing as well. But yeah, so I want everybody to know this is something new and you're getting ready to learn some stuff. So get your paper. Don't just get your tea. Get your paper. Get your pencil.
You're in school.
You're in school today. Class is now in session. So
And I just wanted to say that Maya has done a wonderful profile on a woman that I found out about at the Library of Congress. Part of that 18th century, 19th century kind of African American catalog that I was telling you about. So it's a woman called Victoria Earl Matthews, and I'm sure we'll be speaking about her at some point in the show. Her family story is just incredible.
wow. Wow. So I can't wait, Maya. I'm so happy and excited that you accepted our post. You saw our post on Instagram. I'm just excited. So is there
Yeah.
anything little, what I guess we can just jump right into this. What
Yeah.
started you on this journey?
Well, I, so Race Women and this article are all kind of from the same source, which is that the article came out of um, my work with this Race Women project. And I started Race Women a few years ago. And I kind of happened upon it accidentally, in that I was working on a research project about um, a collection of statistical charts, hand drawn statistical charts that W.E.B. Du Bois had and his students at Atlanta University had created for the 1900 Paris Expedition. And so, which is this World's Fair in Paris, and the focus of the charts was to show the progress of Black America in the 30 odd years since slavery had ended. And so when I was researching these charts, I started kind of digging deeper into, what just Black folks were doing, and how we were thinking, and the kinds of work we were doing at that time to kind of better inform, the what was going on during the time these charts were created. And what I started finding were women, Black women everywhere, but not talked about, kind of on the margins, but not talked about in the same way that, and given the same shine as the W.E.B. Du Bois's and Booker T. Washington's and Frederick Douglass's, who we associate typically with this era. And I started reading about them in newspapers, and started reading their writings, and reading their speeches. And the more I read about them, and the more of them I discovered, the angrier I got.
Mm.
I was I was furious because I could not believe that I had spent so many years of my life not knowing about them.
Mm.
And and that kind of anger propelled me to, like, just dig deeper, and it forced me to really kind of think about what else I didn't know, who else I didn't know, who else was kind of hidden from me all of these years. And then, how can I not only learn about these women, this entire generation of women who were fighting and thinking and agitating during the 19th century and early 20th century. How can I learn about them? Can I share what I've learned? And that's how Race Women was created, which is a site that I launched on Instagram, that just celebrates our unsung early Black feminist foremothers. And then a few months kind of into the site being launched, I was contacted by someone, an editor at the New York Review of Books, about writing an article about some of these women. And I had just done a post on Josephine Turpin Washington, who is a journalist out of Virginia, and who had started writing in newspapers when she was a teenager, as early as 1880, and was a huge proponent of higher education for women, and women's suffrage. And so I was already kind of in that zone. And I started learning about other women journalists who were working during that time. And so that was kind of the main impetus for then the article that came out of that, The Heroines of the America's Black Press. which is a very long answer to your question.
No,
That's
thank
okay.
you. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of delve into, and I'm going to read a little bit from your article called "The Heroines of America's Black Press," because I thought you did a really excellent job in terms of introducing who these women were, and I'd just like to take a little time to explore that a little bit. So
Sure.
so in your words, you were saying they were a mix of wives and mothers, and widows, and women who never married at all. They were civic workers and religious leaders and educators, and many of them were active club women. So there's a real diversity, even amongst their life experiences and where they came from and what they wanted to achieve and what they wanted to do. How did these women find each other? Because what I really loved in the article is you really developed this kind of feeling that there was a real sisterhood amongst them.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, yeah. I kind of like that too. And I'm going to tell you why after you answer that question.
Well, I'm glad that you picked up on that because I think there was a real, um, they were part of the network. And I think that even if uh, a lot of them knew each other personally, but even if they didn't know each other directly, they knew each other's work. They were familiar with each other's work because the Black press was publishing their articles, they were publishing their work, and so they were reading the work of their sisters through the press. But also, a little bit later, so I think a lot of most of the women that I wrote about, all six of them started working, publishing in the 18. I know William Fox started publishing in the late 1870s, but the rest of them in the 80s, starting in the 80s. And so then a little bit after that, in the 1890s, the women's club movement really starts picking up. And the club movement started in white, for white women too, but especially Black women across the U.S. started forming clubs around the country where they were, advocating for temperance and women's suffrage, but they were also these organizational sites for activism. And so a lot of these women knew each other through club women work. They would connect at meetings. Later, they would have national conferences. So they got to know each other that way too. And then a couple of the women that I featured in the article, Lucy Wilmot Smith and Mary Virginia Cook Parrish, they worked together. They were both professors at State University in Kentucky, and were also really involved in the National Baptist Convention. So they were homies. They were friends who also advocated for each other. Lillian Fox wrote for the Indiana Freeman, and wrote about a lot of these women. Lucy Wilmot Smith wrote about Victoria Earl Matthews. So, they were all writing about each other or knowing each other directly or working together or admiring each other's work. Because I think partly, obviously because they admired what they were doing. But I think that there was also a sense of fighting against invisibility and knowing that they could have a bigger voice if they worked together, if they could amplify it together, if it wasn't just one woman in one town at one paper doing something, but if they could all kind of lift each other up, it would make it harder to be ignored.
Well, I actually have a question. You've led beautifully into my next question, which is, do you think there was that sense of camaraderie and sisterhood and support because that's what specifically those? Because again, this was a mix of women. Some came from families who were free people of color. Some had come out of slavery. But that was because the mechanism that enabled black people to survive in this country anyway.
Anyway,
Or
that's right.
was there an added element because were actively excluded from the overall women's kind of enfranchisement, equal equality movement?
Yeah, so I missed the first part of the question. You cut out a little bit. Could
Oh,
you
sorry. I
say
said,
that again?
do you think part of the reason behind their camaraderie and their sisterhood and their support came out of the overall black experience of America? That's what enabled us as a people, whether we were enslaved or free, to kind of do what we needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a huge factor. Knowing, solidarity work, organizational work has always kind of been part of Black people's strategy for survival and for activism. And I think these women were very much aware of that. I mean, and that is not to say that even in working together, there were not differences. But I think that they understood just that they needed each other to amplify their work and their messages.
Okay, so kind of a case of it didn't really matter if your family had been enslaved or free. You were working towards a common goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, these women were around the same time periods of, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, well, as it was moving forward, this was the Harlem Renaissance and things of that nature, right? So,
Before.
well, before it. But my
Yeah.
point is, because it was before it, it was the precursor of it, is what I meant to say. And that precursor of the Harlem Renaissance era didn't just happen in New York. It happened everywhere. So when she placed that camaraderie with those women in there the way she did, I could see that in doing the research in our families for churches, for example. Our black families were they knew all of the pastors, especially those that were founders of churches. Aretha Franklin's father preached at my grandfather's church. Why? Because they knew him. So that's what it was. Aretha Franklin sung at Springfield Baptist Church on 6th Street in Northwest DC. So these are the things, it was this kind of stuff that we had to do, like you said, in order for us to move forward, because nobody else was going to help us. We had to help ourselves. And I feel like, these are the kind of stories that need to be said today, so we as Americans as a whole can know that we can't move forward without each other, period. And I really liked how I saw that in that article.
No,
It was awesome.
Because leading into another question, thinking about the time period, we're talking about really early period of Reconstruction, kind of into Reconstruction,
Right.
beginning of Jim Crow.
Jim Crow, right.
Well, they couldn't express themselves politically because no women had the right to vote, period.
You can't tell them that, because these women, especially Miss Fox, she was not playing.
But
Miss
So-
Fox wasn't playing.
they were excluded from politics. They were active in the church. They were active in the community, and of course, teaching was always a profession. I'm just wondering, in your research, was there anything about writing in and of itself that really they thought, oh, that's the way that that's the voice that I can have? Is there any
Yeah.
kind of anecdotal evidence that kind of talks us through why they chose journalism?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a couple of them explicitly talk about the power of the press. Catherine David Chapman Tillman, who was a poet and wrote fiction and plays, and all on top of her essays. She has, and I think this quote about how, I regard the press as one of the mightiest factors that move this universe of ours. So great is its influence, so powerful its results. I very verily believe that if we, through any unseen force, should lose our free press, our republic would be shattered. So I think that, and also, Mary Virginia Cook Parrish talks about how really encouraged Black women, particularly to enter into journalism, because it was a way, it's a point of connection. It was a way to reach the people they wanted to reach most, to empower them. And so there was this idea that writing was this really powerful voice, really, a really powerful platform to disseminate these messages and ideas and ideals that they cared about and wanted to kind of empower other women to take up.
So the one other question is, journalism is very male dominated. Even then, well, it's more
Even
so
then.
then, but even today, it's a very male dominated, testosterone driven industry. How were they perceived, and what kind of resistance did they have? I mean, how were they viewed, period? And then I guess, how were they viewed? How much support did they get from men?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think that you are absolutely right. It was male dominated then, and it is male dominated now. Gloria Wade Gales, who's a scholar, specifically Black women, American women's history, writes about how a lot of the Black male journalists, did support Black women in getting into the field. And you see kind of evidence of this just because they were there. They were working at these papers. They were getting bylines. There are a few books that came out, were clustered together right at the end, at the beginning of the 1890s, that I actually got a lot of at least my jumping off point research from. Irving Garland Penn's Afro-American Press and its Editors, which came out in 1891 and has a chapter on Black women journalists, featuring 20 of them. Now, granted, they get one chapter out of a whole book, but they are there. And then Monroe Majors came out with a book called Noted Negro Women, Their Triumphs and Activities in 1893. And Lawson Scruggs came out with a book called Women of Distinction, also in 1893, rather. Those two books were entirely devoted to Black women writers, educators, thinking, created by Black men. So, they were given their shine, but I think that they were also, it was harder. It was obviously harder for them. I think that the fact that Lillian Fox ended up writing for the
Indiana Freeman?
No, not the Freeman, the white paper.
Oh, okay.
The Indianapolis News later.
Yeah, okay.
That she wrote for so long without a byline at all. For that paper.
Okay, now that must have been an interesting experience. So a Black woman
Right.
not writing for another Black paper, but for a white paper. So
Yeah.
So did she suffer kind of any? I mean, one, I would imagine the public probably had feelings about female journalists anyway.
And then
but
the fact that she
but a
was
woman
Black.
of color. Did she? I mean, what kind of pushback or were there any kind of issues that she had to kind of deal with professionally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, so yeah, when she started working at the Indianapolis News, she had to, I mean, she was writing without a byline. But the black press kind of made sure that their readership at least knew what her, uh, which articles were hers. I think that and she had to fight for more space for her articles.
So
She
she was.
had to do, the kind of back and forth, the push and pull in the editorial rooms were absolutely something that she and all of these women had to deal with. There's another uh, um, journalist who I was not able to write about in this article, but Pauline Hopkins, whom I don't know if you guys are familiar with her,
No, no, I'm not.
but so she was an editor at a magazine called the Colored American magazine in 1900. It's based out of DC, and she was the magazine's sole woman editor, and she was a force. I mean, she was prolific. She wrote a ton. She wrote a whole series specifically devoted to Black women and their achievements. And then a couple of years into her role as editor, she was pushed out by management at the magazine that was more kind of favorable to Booker T. Washington's more conservative views, and didn't like that she was talking about the things that she was talking about. So they got rid of her.
Wow.
So kind of
Um,
telling her that she wasn't minding her place.
Yeah.
she was not in her place. And they called her temperamental. They said that she was
Wow.
difficult.
These are
You know, but
adjectives
these
they
are
use
things that they
today.
use today about us anyway.
Exactly.
These are the things we can't respond a certain way. It's so funny, and it's not just in business, it's in regular life. Like even with a mate, if you respond to your mate a certain way, then you're being confrontational. And I'm like, this is why Danya is single, because
Mm-hmm.
if you can't take me for who I am and understand that I'm gonna have my moments just like you're gonna have yours, you should be able to accept them just like you want me to accept yours. If those things can't be
Yeah.
done, then there's a problem.
But because I've been
But
asked this.
but that's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. Oh, I was going to say, I mean, but that's like, I was going to say, does that sound familiar? Because that's absolutely something that we still deal with today. But also, like, Ida B. Wells had a reputation, and I'm air quoting here, a reputation for being difficult.
Difficult. Yes, she
Yes.
did. I love her.
But I've had people feel comfortable enough to ask me a question like, Brian, why do black women speak so loud? I'm like, well, first of all, they don't speak any louder than anyone else does. But if they do speak louder, you feel as though they speak loud, it's because culturally they come from a culture where they've never been heard.
Okay.
And if you don't get heard, you speak
gonna
up.
talk. You gonna
You're
speak
you're
up a
gonna
little
speak
bit
up.
more, just because.
Right. Yeah, because we had to. If we wanted to be heard in a room, that means you need to speak a little bit louder.
Right. And then the other thing is that bothers me is that they came to you instead of going to another black woman and
Well, they
asking
wouldn't.
that
They
question.
wouldn't put themselves up for that.
No.
No way.
They scared. Don't be scared. If you feel free enough to ask a black man that question, then why don't you come and just straight to
That's
the
fair
horse's
enough.
mouth? Just come straight to me and ask me, why are you this way?
Right.
Now, don't be mad at my response, but understand the response is coming.
Oh no. Well, if you're going to ask a question, you've got to be prepared for.
You
an
got to
answer.
be prepared. You got to be prepared. So, Mike, can you one of the things that I loved about Miss Miss Lillian Fox was that during she one of the things that she did was she spoke up about the Civil Rights Act of 1875 and it being repealed. She had
Mm-hmm.
no cut cards in what she had to say. And
None.
I'm last week we did a show about a woman by the name of Elizabeth Lewis who was a badass in her own way. Miss Fox follows suit. I mean, without
Mm-hmm.
any stretch of the word, you
She
know,
does.
she follows suit. So basically, she wrote when she was talking about the civil rights. Like I'm gonna do this quote. What she wrote, she said, "You pity England with her lords and commons, Russia with its czars and subject, and yet practically acknowledge that you have a people among you of American birth, whom you considered by God created for your servants." Your inferiors by nature rather than by condition. Now I'm gonna tell you something. When I read that, I was like, "Okay, sis," and I started snapping. I started snapping my fingers and everything because she went straight in on them with no cut cards. This is right not long after for what we talking like 40 years after slavery's over, and she had there was nothing holding her back from that.
Right.
What was the response to her writing this? Did you get anything about that?
I did. I did not. I mean, I it was hard because we're also thinking about like uh like going deep into these archives that are a lot of them well, well kept. So I didn't see what the response was to that article, but clearly um, she kept writing,
Yeah,
and she didn't change, and she kept writing like this. She didn't
yeah,
change her style. So and at the end of her life, as we see, she's basically, I mean, she's like revered. People loved her. And so I think, at least within the Black community in Indiana, in Indianapolis, she was like a a community jewel.
I can believe that.
Um, yeah, she was amazing.
Because you can't always sugarcoat stuff. Sometimes you just have to say it the way it is.
And that's that.
Yeah.
That's my mantra. That's my mantra. Yes, I'm with
And
it.
she's so clear about just pointing out the hypocrisy, like she without sugarcoating anything. Um, she was really, I love her.
Well, I just wanted to share my frustration because what I really wanted to do when I got the idea for the show, I tried to do my research and I tried to find modern books, and by modern I mean pretty much anything written after 1960s about female journalists in general and black female journalists specifically. And I could hardly find anything. I actually found more books on that subject printed in 1880, 1890, 1900,
Hmm.
1910 than after 1960. So I mean, these really are. First of all, women journalists, period, are just forgotten or just overlooked prior to the modern age. But again, black female journalists were. You would think that they had never existed, and
Hmm.
just to get your thoughts on why that is.
Why Black women are not?
Why there's really just no profile of them whatsoever.
Because I think that Black women, period, are the most kind of invisibilized, made invisibilized people. People are, like, we are the least kind of taken into account when it comes to history, when it comes to literature, when it comes to all of these things. And yet we are the major contributors. And, I think that you just see how those forces of both racism and sexism are in play.
Yet there's no
With
hesitation to take culture or fashion or music that black women have created.
How
I
about
mean,
that?
how many Beyonce wannabes
How many?
of many different races
How
are
many?
out
How
there?
many? How
right,
many? Even
right,
though letting my daughter taking my daughter into perspective, Beyonce isn't a good person to use because she uses everybody else as far as she's concerned.
Okay, but there,
But nevertheless, I do get it. I mean, I do get exactly what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, everything about I was drawn to Miss Fox. I mean, everybody in here. We're gonna give you the names of all of the ladies that you wrote about. That's actually my next question. But Miss Fox was just she. Maybe I'm drawn to her because I'm just outspoken, and she was just extremely outspoken. She did not. I think that if she bit her tongue, she might put a hole in it. So instead of
mm,
putting a hole in her tongue, she let it out. And that's me. So I think I took to Miss Fox. Very much so.
whereas I took to Victoria Matthews because again
mm,
we're talking about her mother left her kids to go
mm-hmm.
north.
Right.
Then at the end of the Civil War, went back to Georgia, couldn't find all of
Yep,
her children, which is the saddest part of the whole story. But she
Right.
did get Victoria, and I think it was 3 or 4 of her siblings, and then
yeah,
took
yeah,
them all north. And it's just a powerful story of overcoming slavery, working
Everything.
and sacrificing so your children can have a better life than what you had. And Victoria just took the reins and just ran with
But
it.
we're such
ran
powerful
with it.
people. Like I love us.
Yeah.
I love us. I do. I do.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, it's amazing. So tell us more. Who are the other? Give us the names of the other women that you wrote about in this article, so that everybody knows. Because this is about teaching. So
Or I would say, because there's quite a few of them, and there is the link that's been posted on Genealogy Adventures to the 2 articles.
okay.
Who, I mean, all of the women are like standouts, but I mean, whose story
it,
really inspired you or really moved you?
uh, I mean, they all did. I think that was, and there were obviously, and I say this in the introduction that these women represent just a sample of the larger kind of group of Black women journalists who were writing during this time. But I think that I chose this particular group because I felt similarly like you guys were talking about, how you were drawn to them. They did that for me. I felt very strongly connected to their writing, how just kind of uh, their stories, how outspoken and kind of fierce they were in their own way, and how they went to bat for other Black women, and lifted up other Black women in their writings,
Yes. Yes,
in
they
their
did.
work.
Yes, they did.
Was there any
Mm.
backlash to them being so forthright to what they were doing, and I guess for basically not having any apology for doing what they were doing?
None.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, there was backlash. Victoria Earl Matthews talks about how much, just how much harder it was, how it was infinitely harder to be a Black woman journalist pursuing a career in the field, um, than anyone else. She was extremely outspoken, and that got her into trouble even with other Black women. She kind of notoriously butted heads with Ida B. Wells a little bit, actually, which, surprise, surprise, the other, you're both strong-willed and you have your opinions. Um, and so she kind of got into it with that. Mary Ellen Britton, who was a Kentucky journalist and then eventually transitioned into becoming a doctor and was the first Black woman physician in Kentucky in 1902.
That could not have been easy. Not for Kentucky. That could not have been
Oh,
easy.
right.
Swear.
But she talks about how, early in her career, she was writing a lot of articles, obviously kind of agitating against racial discrimination, and kept getting, a lot of pushback from folks saying that she was too outspoken. And I think a lot of the times too, when these women were outspoken, they were called or characterized as manly. So it was a real deep offense to their womanhood too. And so it was a really kind of deep cut, but also I think they understood how unfair, I was about to say a bad word.
It's okay.
But just how messed up that is. And I think a lot of them, and it certainly did for Mary Britton, that forced her deeper into specifically women's rights activism, because she saw the kind of hypocrisy and the crazy double standards that existed for men versus women, and that kind of propelled them on. Yeah, I don't know if
So,
I answered your question.
no, you did.
You did. You
I've got a
did.
follow up to that. Do you think that for women, for the journalists like Mary Britton, it was a case that she and a few others wanted to go 90 miles an hour while some of the other sisterhoods was going, we need to go 35 miles an hour? Is it that, or
Yeah.
was it deeper than that?
I don't know.
No, no,
Yeah.
I don't
I've,
know if it was. I mean, I'm sure that was true on, for some, on some level. Um,
or was
just
it
like people have different kind of approaches and ways of pursuing something now that existed then. And then you think about, on top of that, the times. This is the Victorian era. So everything is, the gender roles are very deeply prescribed, and women are still supposed to be kind of the 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 heads of their household, but behind their husbands. And so there's a lot of kind of navigating that, while also, for some who were really there were some women who were kind of taking a yes and approach and saying okay, well, maybe we'll advocate for some more equality within gender, but we're not going to go too far. But then there were others who were no, equality means equality, and we want that everywhere, without equivocation, without qualifying. And so in that way, there was maybe some 90 versus 30. But there's there are a lot of different cultural factors kind of mixing together during this time.
And the other thing that I really love is this doesn't seem to be a specific part of America. We're talking about black women, whether they were in New England, the South,
It didn't matter.
the Midwest.
Right. It didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
The thing that each one of these women that you have listed, that you talk about on this article, are just great. They all had some type of quote that touches on things that are happening today. So for example, Lucy Smith, when she made the comment, when she said, "Give the girl the same freedom in exercising as the boy," she argued, "the same liberty of wearing loose clothes, the same mental food, and she will accomplish the same work." These are things that we're fighting still today. Still today. And then I'm looking at, then we go and we look at Dr. Mary Ellen Britton. She was talking about women's suffrage. Now, I'm going to tell you something right now at this moment. You know, we all are celebrating the 100 years of women being able to vote. So Miss Britton was a part of that. She was a part of the women's suffrage movement. But Miss Britton wasn't able to vote. How can you imagine her feeling on this whole thing? Because Miss Britton wasn't able to vote until the 60s.
Yeah.
So she missed her chance because she died in 25. So she fought for this right
And didn't see it.
and didn't see it. These are these are the things that I think why
None of these women did.
Huh?
None of these women really did.
Right. None of them did. And a lot of people don't realize that. So when you see these commercials, like Ancestry has this commercial where they're talking about the women's suffrage right now, trying to pull people in to do their research and so on and so forth. And they show black and white women and fighting this, that, and the third. But what they don't tell is that the black women did not get that opportunity to vote after these women won that chance to vote. That needs to be known. That needs to be told. And that's why I'm telling it.
I didn't know that until Danya told me that. I just assumed that all women, provided you met the criteria that if you were a woman, you could vote.
Yeah. We didn't have that chance. Black people still didn't have that chance. So it's crazy that she actually talked about women's suffrage, talked about the right to vote, and then didn't get it. Like, these are some amazing women.
Yeah, and they didn't get it after, when it was passed, when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920s, but they were cut out of the movement to get there too, obviously. Lucy Wilmot Smith was talking about women's suffrage 30 years before they got the right to vote. Ostensibly, in 1920, she was writing about this. So, these women, even though they were pushed to the margins for so long, for decades, before, during, and after, they were still there. They were still fighting and, trying to be recognized.
So my takeaway quote from this, and I'm sure Danya will cheer me from the back, if you are a black female living in America and you have the legal right to vote and you are of the age to vote, these women paved the way for you to do it.
Yes, they did.
You are their wildest dreams. And they paid this forward for you. They fought for you to be able to do this.
Yes, they did. And I think that's what's missing. And that's why when people talk about, why should I go and vote? This is why. Mm-hmm. I mean, Britain, she said, she was labeled a strong-minded, this is what's written in the article. She was labeled a strong-minded woman for her opinions. And she said, not knowing the import, I argued against the term. But she continued, This was no longer so. I now throw away the old ignorant prejudices which I am ashamed to have ever held and stand here this evening fearlessly defending women's suffrage. She did it with no fear, y'all, and she still ain't get the chance to do it. These are the things that you do. You as a female can do it. As of 18 years old, you can now vote because of them. And I mean all women. These women that stood in this way for you to get that opportunity to vote. Now, yes, black women were to the back, but they acknowledged the fact that they were to the back and they wouldn't have been able to get to where they were without them. Even though they didn't allow them to vote, they know that they wouldn't have been able to get to where they were without them. Because we were strong. And y'all got to understand the fear that it had, that it incorporated for people, because again, we are not too far removed from slavery. These are people that, as far as the old enslavers were concerned, could not read, could not write, did not have an education, but yet speaking the way I just read. How is that possible? That's a lot to take in. That's a lot to take in that short time period. So it was scary. It was scary for them. It was scary for us. It was a fear. But we just fought through that fear because we were already fighting fear anyway. That's just how I look at it. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I love researching. Okay, go ahead.
Can I also just say, just to circle back to something we were talking about earlier about how, Brian, you were saying that there were not a lot of books about these Black women journalists, modern books. But and I write about this in the article too, the research and the work that does exist, more often than not, they are written by other Black women. So we, over the years, we have been the ones to make sure that these women's legacies have endured. And any evidence that we have now that these women existed is because of the work of other Black women, historians, scholars, academics, to keep them alive.
Yes.
And
it really...
I hope on your website too, when you're linking to, at the end of the article, I have a few of the historians that really helped kind of inform my foundation research. So please give a shout out to them as well.
You talking about the IBeam Center for the Future of Journalism?
No, I'm talking about Gloria Wade Gale.
Oh, okay. Evelyn Brooks Higginbottom.
Yeah, Darlene Clark Hines.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, just to give you an example, I actually went into a Barnes & Noble bookstore, and this was a big one. And I thought, well, let me try the Black History section first. I was trying to think where a book about Black female journalists would be. So I went to the Black History section, nothing. Just nothing whatsoever. Then I thought, well, let me go to the American History section and see what they have. So there wasn't really a lot about female journalists anyway. Like there were books written by female journalists who, are alive today about female journalists of the past, but nothing. Absolutely nothing about black journalists.
So what are your next moves? What are you about? What are the next things that you're going to be doing, Maya?
Yeah, well, continuing to just kind of do my work, maintaining the Instagram site. I'm also just working on other kind of writing projects involving the women that are kind of still ongoing, but just continuing to write and hopefully kind of partner. I think a big dream with this project is figuring out how to get these histories in spaces where we on school curriculums.
I knew she was going to say that.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that. That's like the biggest dream of mine in the world. Like, I want so badly to start really just getting our information on school curriculums because it needs to be there. It makes such a difference. KRS-One made a comment in his song "You Must Learn," and basically it says, when ignorance, I'm a stop because I want to say this correctly. So I'm going to look this comment up and I'm going to look this statement up. But it is the most powerful lyric that I have ever heard in any song in my life. And it makes so much sense that it's ridiculous, but it's the best thing in the world. So basically, he said, let me demonstrate the force of knowledge. Knowledge reigns supreme. The ignorant is ripped to smithereens. What do you mean when you say I'm rebellious? That's not it. Hold on. I want to make sure I get the right one. Cause it says, here it is. He said, I believe that if you're teaching history filled with straight up facts, no mystery, teach the student what needs to be taught. Because black and white kids both take shorts. When one doesn't know about the other one's culture, ignorance swoops down like a vulture. How you miss that? That's such a big deal to me. And because if they don't know, then that's why they're coming back and saying I'm better than you. That's why they're coming back and feeling like they're better, because they don't know. They don't realize that we actually worked hand in hand. We worked side by side to make America what it is. They don't have that information. So it's not their fault. To a certain degree, it's not their fault. So to have this kind of information into school curriculum, it would bring such a difference, such a type of respect to each other.
And not even just for people of color, for girls, period.
Yeah.
God, for everybody. For everybody.
Yeah.
It's just
Absolutely.
amazing. So I definitely, I see your vision and I understand your dream. I do. I do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well,
Yeah, I mean.
Oh no, sorry. Go
Sorry.
ahead. It's real. Sorry, everyone. It's slightly challenging because we can't actually see you on screen.
Yeah.
I know.
But I'm sorry. Do continue.
No, I mean, I think that is so right. And I think especially with, this kind of history, people think that, civil rights movement started in the 1950s, and there were some early precursors, obviously, with Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass, and W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington. But there is 100 years of history in between, filled with activists, fighters, writers, people, these women who were doing that work.
Yep.
And so many of them. And it's important for us to know how deep and this history goes, how deep this fight goes, and that it's not pockets of activism along a timeline, but it's a steady stream that is filled with especially Black women who were kind of at the forefront. Even if they weren't being acknowledged, they were there. And we talk about, how it's important for all of us to know this history, but especially Black girls. And I think that's true. It's so important for us to know the kind of stock we come from.
Yes.
The badassery.
Yes. Yes.
That is who we are. And that's always
Yes.
been there. So that's why, one of the many, many reasons why I want to kind of get this history in school curriculums, just kind of flood the landscape with these stories, with these women, so that people know that they were there.
Please do. And in the final 45 seconds of the show, I hope that basically the audience and anyone who watches the video, I mean, one of the things that Donnie and I really try to do is stress that American history is just, it's beautiful. When you really get into
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's intricate. It's multi-layered. Everyone contributed. And that's
It's everything that people want to get, that
Yeah.
people want right now.
But that's what the history curriculums, no matter what school you're in,
It's
should
it's
reflect.
it's everything that people want right now, and they don't even know it.
Yeah, we don't even know it.
Yeah, we didn't. We know now.
We
though.
know now,
and
but
we're
we didn't.
constant, and we're constantly learning it. But the thing is that it's literally everything that people are fighting for today. It's already been fought for and has happened.
And that's our takeaway.
And that's our takeaway. So, Maya, thank you so much for being on the show and just for talking to us. And we're gonna keep in touch.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
We're
Thank
definitely
you so
gonna
much.
keep
This
in
has
touch.
been wonderful.
And
All right.
we will definitely do our bit to continue getting the word out about your project and what you're doing. For you guys at home or wherever you're watching us, thank you so much once again for sharing your Sunday with us.
Yes, I'm Donya Williams.
I'm Brian Sheffy. This is Genealogy Adventures, and we'll see you next week at 4 p.m.